I don't know what is wrong with me. I can't stop restarting my life. This is the second time that I upped and left as a single mom with no money, no job. I'm just out here just making bold decisions. But honestly, once again, this was the best decision I ever made in my life. And I know a lot of people are interested in moving to Miami because it is Miami. And so I want to talk about my experience moving here, but most importantly, how I got to this place now. So first things first, I'm going to talk about the order that I went in, which is very unconventional. So instead of looking for a job first, which would be the proper way of going about this situation, I actually just looked for a place first. And the reason why I even moved out here was because I felt called by God. Like I felt like he was just telling me to come out here. And so because I had that calling, I felt even more bold enough to just go ahead and find a place before I even really had a job. I was kind of searching for a job, but I just accepted the fact that I'm going to move regardless if I have a job or not, which is very bold. I definitely recommend anyone pray on that. You know, you don't have to make a decision that crazy. You shouldn't be making a decision that crazy without God's consent. And so when I was looking for a place, I did, just Google, because you never really know what the rent rate is going for in the areas. And I had no idea about Miami. Like I didn't know really much about like locations. I've only was out here like twice my whole life, so I really didn't know Miami enough to know which areas I should be in. But when I was looking for a place, the first place I was looking at was in Hollywood, and it's because a client of mine's had recommended the building that she used to live in, and it was beautiful, but the price was too high for me. I knew coming down that I probably wasn't gonna have no job, and so I needed my rent as low as possible. So that became a priority after I got the idea of not being in a high rise. I'm like, come on, we gotta downsize. And it's so crazy because I went from a 3-bedroom, a brand new car, fresh off the lot, no miles, to like no car and a 1-bedroom. So it was definitely a downgrade, but I knew that I had to make that sacrifice and it would work out in the long run. I just wanted to be more comfortable, and I know that I couldn't match the lifestyle that I was doing in Tampa. And so when I was looking for places, I didn't look for specific areas. I just tried to look for a place that was like within my price range. Like I tried to find as cheap as possible, and then I would research the building. And so my building actually low-key had bad reviews, but I knew that those reviews were probably from old management because I did kind of peep that in the reviews. But I just mainly was attracted to it because of the price. And then I also was paying attention to the area because I told myself once I got out of New York State, I'm not living in nobody's hood no more. Like I'm not doing that. And so when I was Googling the area, I mainly paid attention to the stores that were surrounding it. So I live by a Whole Foods. I am not near like that. I'm not that close to Walmart, so you get that idea. Like I'm near a Publix, I'm near a Target, so you want to pay attention to those little details because like, okay, if there's a Whole Foods here, it's probably not that bad of a neighborhood. And I also use this thing called Hood Maps, but I don't think it's out no more. But Hood Maps, it would tell you what is the good area and what the bad area is, and then just like little funny things. And so I did use that as well to determine it. And I actually didn't really see the place before moving in. I just seen pictures and videos. I didn't see it until I had the money in hand and I flew down to sign the lease. Like as soon as I gave them the money, I seen the place. So I kind of was just going off of vibes for real. But the place did look like it was kind of spacious because, mind you, I do have a set of twins, so it's 3 of us, and I knew that, okay, I'm downgrading to a 1-bedroom, so I do need some space, but it wasn't like a tiny 1-bedroom, so that also convinced me to move down. So that is how I found a place. I just Googled and I paid attention to the area. Now, when it comes to a babysitter, because of course that would be a next step, I did have a cousin that lived down here, but he was like an hour from me because Miami is like an hour from Miami. It's, it's kind of big because of traffic. And so I really wasn't like thinking about that though. I was like, oh, that's cool that, I have a cousin here. Maybe, I could get a little bit of help, but I wasn't banking on that. I knew that moving down that I also didn't have a job. I was applying for places, but nobody was trying to hear me out. And then I was going to do Lyft and Uber, but I found out I couldn't because I had points on my license, which is how I kind of got through when I first moved to Tampa from New York State, but I realized I couldn't do that. And so my plan was, I actually did have my car. I lied. I did have my car for like a month or two. So when I first moved out here, in order to make money, because I moved from Tampa to Miami, it was like 4 hours. So I would drive down on the weekends with my daughters. And I would, dang, this looks just like my brother. That is weird. But I would drive from Tampa to Miami. Miami to Tampa, to do clients on the weekends, but eventually that became like unsustainable because, you know, clients would be canceling and stuff like that. I didn't have time for that. Like if I'm going out there, I need to make money. But when I would do that, I would make like 1 to 2K. So that's kind of how I survived for the month. And then after that, I would, what else was I doing? Yeah, that was it. I was trying to apply to places, but they were all just turning me down. So I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to build up my clientele because I'm a lash artist. And so I already knew I was going to do that regardless for some extra money. So I didn't have a living room. I actually sold all of my furniture before I even moved. So my whole house was pretty much empty. So my living room was empty. And so I just put, a massage bed up there. And then because I am a single mom and I didn't have a babysitter, I was like, this is going to be what it is for the meantime until my girls get a little older and they can have a little more freedom. So I would just work while they were home. So that was how I figured out like the babysitting situation and the job situation. I just thugged it out. And honestly, it was so tough because when I first moved, I actually was going back and forth to New York because my father was in the hospital. He ended up passing away like shortly after I moved out here. So imagine what I was going through at that time. It was so tough, especially because you got to remember I'm going back and forth, so that's costing me money, and I'm don't even really have a job for real. You know, like I don't have the steady income that I was having before. So I did have like a little bit saved up, but it really wasn't that much. But what really kept me through was the fact that I was doing lash classes. And with the classes, I was charging $700, and because I was doing multiple a month, that's kind of how I felt like I was living paycheck to paycheck, but it got me through. So that's how I worked it out financially. Plus, this is the second time that I upped and left. I would say, from my experience, it takes on average 2 years to fully feel like you're settled in. And also, if you've never left your hometown, you will be a little homesick depending on how close you are with family. But I don't have I have a big family, but like I grew up with just my immediate family. And even then I was kind of a little homesick when I first left. And so I know that's normal. It's just part of the journey if this is your first time leaving your hometown. So I would say, you got to give yourself grace. Like it's going to take you time to get adjusted. You have to also understand that it does get a little bit lonely if you're just moving by yourself. You will struggle. I'm not gonna lie, you will struggle, but it's gonna be worth the sacrifice in the long run. I think a lot of times I feel like a lot of times we really need to appreciate the journey. Like when I think back to certain moments while I'm like struggling, it's actually like some of the happiest moments, because you start to lean on other things outside of money. And so you lean on the love. So I leaned on the love that I had for my children. I leaned onto the love I had for my business. I really wanted to thrive. And so those struggle times are actually some of the best times of our lives. And so I think a lot of times we need to just sit back and actually enjoy the process. And I think we'll be much happier people if we started doing that. So, it is a journey, but it's well worth it in the long run. You just gotta, and I feel like God isn't going to give you anything you can't handle. Of course we have free will, but I don't know. I feel like with me, sometimes I might make a mistake, but I feel like God makes sure that it doesn't cost me. He makes sure that there is a way out of it. And because when you keep testing God to that capacity, or if you actually follow your faith and you follow what you think God is saying, I feel like it builds your trust with him. Because I've already done this, I already knew, okay, what's the worst that can happen, and I think my faith just grows every time I make these bold moves, and it makes it more and more easier to do it. You just have to take that first step. And so if you're thinking about Miami, I definitely recommend. It's not for everyone, but the only way you'll know if it's for you is if you come and try it out for a year at least. I say give yourself 2 years if you're going to move out here. But if it ever gets too hard, of course, you should not be asking me for advice. You should be asking the Creator. You should be asking God. But that is all that I have. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments.